What's up, everybody? So there is some news currently swirling in the MMA world right now, and that is because of a post Dricus Du Plessis recently put on his Instagram page that says, "Looks like someone wants another beating in Oz. I'm in. I also wouldn't want to fight the king of Africa on home soil. Manifestation's working good for you again." Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a couple important details in this post from Dricus Du Plessis that we're going to decipher. I'm going to tell you when I think this fight's going to take place, obviously where, and whether I think that this is the right matchup to make. And ladies and gentlemen, it's very clear that the UFC is going to look to book Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya for UFC 305 in Perth, Australia. And the timeline kind of lines up to make the most sense, right? UFC usually heads to Perth at that September timeframe. That has been kind of the routine now for the UFC. This is the matchup that I wouldn't say makes the most sense. It's still a big fight, and we all knew that this was going to happen. We knew the UFC was going to screw over Sean Strickland. And I know there's that camp out there that you guys just don't like Sean Strickland, and you're like, he doesn't deserve a rematch. What the heck has he done at 185 pounds? I don't know. He just walked through who everyone looks at as one of the greatest 185 pounders and beat him worse than we have never seen anybody just walk through Israel Adesanya like that until Sean Strickland did it. And everyone wants to say it's a fluke, it's a this and a that. The bottom line is Sean Strickland walked through Izzy in Perth, Australia, basically in Izzy's backyard, where the fans were on his side. And Sean Strickland put on an unbelievable performance against Dricus Du Plessis. I scored it for Sean Strickland. I thought he won the fight. However, it was incredibly close, so I understand how DDP won the fight. The problem is that should have been the matchup that they rebooked next, because the reasons are Sean Strickland is one of the biggest names at 185 pounds right now. Like, he might be the biggest name in the middleweight division. So why in the world is that not the matchup the UFC is looking to book? Well, because they cannot afford to fumble this big fight between Izzy and DDP again. Because let me take you back to when Dricus Du Plessis pulled off the upset over Robert Whittaker. A lot of people didn't think DDP was going to do that. Respect to the South African fans, because they all were very adamant, like, this man is going to take out Robert Whittaker. And we were all like, no, that ain't happening. And look at DDP. Goes in there, shocks everybody, and gets it done. Then they offer him the title fight against Israel Adesanya in Perth, Australia. He's like, my ankle's bothering me. I got some injuries going on. And in all fair play to Dricus Du Plessis, I wouldn't have taken a title fight compromise like that, because Izzy and his camp, they're absolutely trying to take advantage of that opportunity, get you on a quick turnaround, and try to give Izzy every advantage he can. And the UFC was all for it. We've seen the UFC protect these golden boys, these golden childs that they have, right? And it's no fault of the fighters. It's just what the UFC does. The guys that are the marketable stars, like we've seen the UFC turn Aljamain Sterling on a quick turnaround after beating Cejudo to favor a matchup for Sean O'Malley. Like, we've seen the UFC do this. This is no mystery to things that the UFC wouldn't do. Like, we know the UFC does stuff like this. So good on Dricus Du Plessis and his camp saying, no, we're going to get healthy and then we're going to get our opportunity. So the UFC calls Sean Strickland. And make no mistake about it, the UFC thought that Sean Strickland was an easy tune-up fight for Israel Adesanya to keep him busy until Dricus Du Plessis was healthy. And boy, did Sean Strickland have other plans, man. He exposed kind of the boxing deficiency on the side of Izzy Adesanya. I'd always said Izzy is a very good kickboxer. He does have a good jab. He does have good straight punches. But if you close him down and force him to fight on the inside, like we saw Kelvin Gastelum do, there is opportunity to do well against Israel Adesanya. And boy, did Sean Strickland put that on display. He walked through Israel Adesanya. Make no mistake about it. That was absolutely a one-sided beatdown by Sean Strickland. It was an unbelievable performance. Then Strickland wins the strap, goes out there, defends it against Dricus Du Plessis in what was a razor-close fight, where I actually thought I picked DDP to win the fight, which, I mean, he did, but I actually, when I scored it, when I was watching it, and when I watched it back, I had it 3-2 Strickland. I had Strickland winning the fight. And so to sit there and say Sean Strickland does not deserve the rematch, I think is just dead wrong. Anytime we've seen razor close fights like that, we usually get the UFC to turn around and book a rematch. The only reason we may not see a rematch is because, well, the other guy he's not a big name. No one's really caring to tune in. Are people not caring to tune in and watch Sean Strickland, whether you like him or not? Sean Strickland is probably the biggest name at 185 right now. So it's clear the UFC doesn't really want Sean Strickland to have his hands back on gold, which, he's very vocal and he's very controversial. But at the end of the day, guys, this should be a rematch between Dricus Du Plessis and Sean Strickland. I really believe that. I think that that's the fight to make. However, we all knew they were not going to fumble this opportunity because they can't risk DDP going in there and losing to Strickland and all the different things. They want this rivalry matchup. It's going to have no glove touch. It's going to have the trash talk. It's going to have that WWE-esque vibe that draws in the casual fan, draws in a bunch of different people. That's what the UFC is looking for. But in terms of the matchup, I think that this is an interesting fight because while everyone might say, well, we've seen Izzy, he's not hungry anymore, Strickland walked through him, we saw what DDP did to Sean Strickland, I think this is a really hard fight for both guys. And I think X's and O's wise, this is a really interesting matchup because what we've seen from Dricus Du Plessis, he's gotten better every time we've seen him. Ever since he got the nose fixed, which I always said that is going to make a world of difference. And everyone's like, oh, that's ridiculous. The new mythical creature, it's just a nose. Like, oh, it doesn't make that big of a deal. Yeah, ask Justin Gaethje. Have you ever had a busted up nose? Have you ever had like where your nose is super stuffy and you can't breathe really well and you try to go in and train or lift weights or do any type of endurance work? How hard that is? Imagine doing that, preparing for fights, going in there fighting. You're just straight up mouth breathing. Like that is a hard thing to do. So Dricus Du Plessis not only is able to breathe a little bit better, but his technicalities and understanding in terms of being in the cage, building up that confidence, taking out a guy like Robert Whittaker, going in there in a close fight with Sean Strickland and winning a decision. DDP is evolving. He's gotten a lot better. He has very underrated striking. I know he doesn't have the most aesthetically pleasing style that we see, but he's a strong guy for the weight class. He has legit power, and he's very unorthodox, and he blends things really, really well together. And I think he's a real problem for Izzy Adesanya. With that being said, it's not fair to rule out Izzy either because Adesanya has been one of the best middleweights of all time. Whether you like him or not, we can't take away the fact that Izzy Adesanya has done some incredible things. He defended the title numerous times. He was a very active champion. And this is the longest drought that we've seen in terms of not seeing Izzy compete in quite some time. This would basically be a year to the day of him taking time off. And Izzy needed some time off. He said, I got some injuries. I just need to kind of rework it. Being that active for that long, fighting in title fights, preparing for 5 rounds after 5 rounds over and over and over again, that definitely takes a toll on the body. But I think Izzy has a real shot at winning this matchup. And I know a lot of people are going to be quick to say, oh, well, he's taking time off. He's not hungry anymore. DDP's a bad matchup for him. All these different things, which I totally understand what everyone's saying there. But when we see a focused, dedicated, and committed on his A-game Israel Adesanya, and you make Izzy fight, that guy will fight, man. We saw when Alex Pineda brought the fight to Izzy. We saw in both of those matchups, you cannot say that any of those fights with Pineda were boring because they were not. They were technical chess matches that had a lot of action to them. And if you get in the phone booth and you make Israel Adesanya fight, he will do that. Now, Sean Strickland kind of exposed a little bit of the weakness in the game of Izzy, like I mentioned earlier in the video with, Kelvin Gastelum closing him down, getting him in that phone booth range to where he can have some success. The question is, can DDP close him down, which I believe he can. I believe Dricus Du Plessis is very good defensively. The jab of Sean Strickland was giving DDP some problems, but Strickland's jab lands on everybody. So if Izzy can kind of take a little bit of what Strickland did, get that jab working, sit on the outside, move around, bang leg kicks, and kind of sit on the outside and pick and poke at DDP, I think Izzy can have a lot of success. The question is he able to keep DDP off of him? Because I think DDP is going to have almost no respect to the game of Israel Adesanya, considering how good DDP has been in his past couple fights. We saw what he was able to do against Robert Whittaker. We saw what he was able to do against Sean Strickland. He almost takes that first round off, per se. He stays very tight defensively, doesn't open himself up to be countered, stays, very tight, just kind of walks forward and kind of gets a feel for what you're trying to do. And then from after that first round on, he puts his foot on the gas and then starts to march forward. We saw that against Robert Whittaker, where Whittaker had a very good first round. And the minute that second round started, Du Plessis was in his face, backing him up, marching him down, controlling him. And that's exactly what DDP started to do as the fight progressed against Sean Strickland. Now, I would like to believe that Adesanya is going to have the striking advantage in this matchup. As long as he's dialed in and he comes back and he's the Izzy we know, I still give him an advantage in the striking. What I will say is DDP definitely possesses the takedown threat. He's a very strong guy. I do think he's going to be able to get a hold of Adesanya. He's going to be able to get into that dirty boxing range. And the question is going to be, what happens when that happens? Because we can sit there and say, well, this guy beat Izzy, Izzy beat that guy, DDP beat that guy. We can sit there and play that fight math over and over and over again. But we all know MMA math does not add up. So I ask you, when this fight takes place, who do you think is going to win? Because I got to tell you guys, despite what you say, I know Sean Strickland should be getting the rematch. This is still a very intriguing stylistic matchup between these two guys. I'd be curious to hear what you all think in terms of a prediction down in the comments. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, I appreciate you all. See you next time.